to our first ever one-to-one interview for Container News. Today we're privileged to have Dr. Noel Hacegaba from the Port of Long Beach, Deputy Director from the Port of Long Beach. Welcome to you, Dr. Noel.
Thank you, Nick.
Perhaps I should just call you Noel.
That's fine. That's the name my mother gave me. It's a pleasure to join you, and I'm equally honored to be part of this first of many episodes.
Thank you. So, Noel, I was going to ask you a strange question to begin with, because I was looking through the figures at the Port of Long Beach. I was really interested to see in the list of countries that Long Beach actually has the most TEUs from, import TEUs from. Bizarrely, is this kind of outlier in Italy, who is the 7th biggest, and I don't understand why. Do you know why?
Well, happy to answer the question, Nick, and believe me, that's not the only country that has caught the eye of others. But I think the bigger picture is that approximately 70% of our business is with China. So when you look at the rankings in terms of total TEU that we trade on a yearly basis, China far outpaces everyone else.
Sure.
When you look at countries 4, 5, 6, and beyond, each of them have just a slither, and Italy falls into that category. But a lot of our trade with Italy, as you can imagine, has to do with food products, wines, agricultural products. A lot of the things that we here in America enjoy about Italy, their cuisine, their goods. In addition to that, there's also apparel and some other commodities that here in America we enjoy consuming. But that's the short answer to your question.
It's just it caught my eye, I guess, because everywhere else, every other country in that top 10 list was Asian, and it kind of makes sense. But the Italy, you'd think maybe it would be closer to go to New York, but I'm assuming the ships go through the Panama Canal to come to Long Beach.
And I have no doubt that most of Italy's trade is with ports on the eastern seaboard. I would also add that the rankings ebb and flow when you look beyond, countries 5, 6, 7, and so forth. They change year to year, right? It just depends on certain market shifts, market conditions, etc.
Yeah, I can imagine that there's been a lot of shifts in the last year. I expect that 2020 is going to be an outlying year in terms of data. How did you find 2020?
2020, I like to say that we have not had in our industry a normal year in some time. 2020 is historically abnormal. I mean, we've never seen anything like it. When you look at the cargo trends month to month, you'll note, at least here for the Port of Long Beach, the first 6 months of the year declines, in some cases double-digit declines. And that's because the pandemic essentially paralyzed manufacturing overseas in China and surrounding countries. That impacted our imports. When the pandemic made its way to America, it impacted demand here as health orders sheltered us in our homes. Folks were not able to go out and consume goods. So the combination of the impact to imports to supply and the impact to demand really held the first half of 2020 for us down. But when you get to July, you see this very quick turnaround. In fact, from July through the end of 2020, we've seen a cargo surge, Nick, that we've never seen. In fact, the cargo surge was so strong in the last half of the year that it catapulted us for the calendar year to our best year on record. So it's just been an amazing story, an amazing turnaround, and it all happened in 2020.
So you clearly, the West Coast ports in general, but Long Beach as well, was not prepared for such a surge in cargo. But it hasn't actually caught up with the cargo even now, even 6 months later, has it?
Well, I think it's fair to say no one was prepared for what happened in 2020. But I think what's important to note, and to get to your question, what's the important lesson here is that disruption comes in many forms, right? It came in the form of pandemic in 2020. The year before, it was in the form of tariffs. And so every year introduces a new form of disruption, if you will. And I think that that's what has made our industry a little more resilient. I can tell you that here on the West Coast, we're not immune. We're used to these disruptions now. We've seen a different disruption every year for the last 6-7 years. And I think what we're seeing today in terms of cargo volumes is the market stabilizing, right? All these disruptions, all this volatility that was introduced because of the pandemic, because of the U.S.-China trade war, you see a market that's now recovering, it's stabilizing. So I don't know what 2021 has in store for us, but it might be a little more of 2020. But to answer your question, Nick, I think 2020 in the end put us ahead of where we were in 2019 and 2018 because of the U.S.-China trade war that we experienced.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, you say that you were better prepared now because of the past, your past experiences with disruptions. But I'm looking at the rail operations. Hapag-Lloyd are now saying that to move a rail car out of with containers out of Long Beach, delays are 9.1 days on average. In LA, it's worse, 17.8 days. All of the American ports are suffering similarly, but Long Beach also. If you were that prepared, surely there wouldn't be these delays. You'd be better able to ride out the disruption.
Yeah, that's certainly a fair question, Nick. And I would say, just to clarify, we have come to expect disruption, right? Disruption, when it hits our port, it can be triggered by any number of things, right? What we've seen in recent history is a global pandemic, a U.S.-China trade dispute, realignment in the industry, consolidation on the shipping line side. I mean, that's what we've all endured the last 5, 6, 7 years. But how these disruptive triggers show themselves in port operations is the same, right? We run into a system imbalance, whether it's on the rail side, on the truck side. We have these artificial shortages of equipment, whether it's chassis, bare tables on the rail side. And so what we've learned is that regardless of what causes a disruption, we have to be prepared to ensure that we have an adequate supply of equipment, ensure that all the stakeholders in the supply chain are adequately communicating and coordinating to make sure that the equipment is where it is when it is needed. What we're seeing today, though, what has exacerbated this is this cargo surge that commenced back in July of 2020. I don't believe the market was prepared for that cargo surge. We had just come off a precipitous decline in cargo volumes from January through June. So that certainly caught, I think, the market unawares. But what we're doing now is we're applying as many solutions as we can to help move that cargo on those ships through the terminals as quickly as possible.
Can you go through some of the solutions? Can you just say what some of those solutions might be?
Absolutely. So one solution that we introduced as a port authority, which is innovative and had never been done before, is we made some land that was available within our port area, and we call it Project Store. It stands for short-term overflow resource. And the idea there, Nick, is that as soon as ships arrive and the containers are discharged, rather than wait for those containers to be removed from the terminal into the distribution centers, into the hinterland, we made space available in our port so that those containers can be temporarily stored, staged, and then processed ultimately to their distribution centers. That has been a tremendous help. It has provided tremendous relief to our shippers because now they have more flexibility. They have more options on how to store, how to process their containers.
So I'm sorry, I have to press you on this because the other thing is on the 8th of January, outside of Long Beach and LA, which are next door to each other, there were 35 ships at anchorage. So if Project Store was a success, surely you wouldn't need it, and And secondly, surely Commissioner Daniel Maffei wouldn't be saying he's looking at empties stacking up at the ports, including the West Coast ports.
Well, I think that's a fair question. And let me clarify that the project store is only about 40 acres, right? So not nearly enough to accommodate the bigger need that's hitting both ports, LA, Long Beach. But the reason why we think it's such an innovative solution is because we can foresee, for example, months, years down the line, whenever we have another run-up of cargo, solutions like store can be extremely helpful in providing relief to the terminals. And while 40 acres may not make a dent on the overall picture of our cargo profile, it has made a difference for the shippers whose containers are not stranded in the terminal and have no place to go, whether it's the distribution center and the warehouses, but now they have options. And Nick, the other point to keep in mind as well is one of the key reasons why we have so many ships at anchor and containers are in the terminal longer than we would like is because the pandemic has severely restricted operating hours at the warehouses and the distribution space. And let me remind you that in Southern California, we have nearly 2 billion square feet of warehouse and distribution center space. No one else in the country has that. Yet, because of the surge, because of the restrictions that were imposed in response to COVID, we have this impact to both ends of the supply chain. But we're working through it. Our men and women, our dock workers on the waterfront are showing up to work. We have not shut down our operations a single day, and we're completely committed to working through this surge.
Commissioner Daniel Maffei also said yesterday, actually, that while in November the Commission voted unanimously to expand the Commissioner Dye's fact-finding investigation, specifically into practices in the nation's 3 largest ports that seem to be contributing to the congestion and unfairness at the ports. Now, I know that a lot of shippers are feeling that demurrage detention charges are unfair. The preparedness of the ports was, it wasn't there. It wasn't enough. It's not enough. The exporters are being hit. What can you say to those shippers that are not getting their exports out of the US? What can you say to those people whose cargo is stuck at your port?
Well, the short answer is their problem is ours, right? The issues that they're experiencing,
but they're paying for it, not you. So
correct. And I think it's important for them to know that as a port authority, we take their concerns very seriously. I'm very familiar with the fact-finding and mission that was initiated by the Federal Maritime Commission. In fact, I participated in that, and I applaud and support what the FMC is trying to achieve through all of these efforts. I think what we need to keep in mind, Nick, is that it's a system, right? The supply chain is a system of discrete business units that have to interrelate. And often those handoff points become friction points. And when friction points get exacerbated with a cargo surge, it actually exposes long-standing issues that we've seen in our industry. And I think what a lot of these efforts are trying to achieve and resolve are some of these legacy issues. Better coordination, better communication. When you look at empties and inbound containers, for example. Another solution that we have identified here at the Port of Long Beach and are pursuing along with our marine terminal operators is to increase the number of the overall percentage of dual transactions. We believe that helps to bring balance to the supply chain. A dual transaction is effectively when a truck trip becomes two in one. And that is when a truck heads into the terminal to drop off a container for export or as an empty. In the same visit, in the same transaction, they pick up a load. Right now, some of our terminals are processing 70% of their overall appointments as dual transactions, Nick. That's unheard of. We announced just a couple of months ago that we would like to see the overall percentage of dual transactions at our port in the coming months and years to 50%. Because we believe that that's what would bring balance to the system. We believe that that will help address some of the root causes that are leading to some of these demurrage and detention issues. So those are some of the things that we're pursuing as a port authority, working in collaboration with our stakeholders, and also the Federal Maritime Commission.
So the FMC is also suggesting that it may be time for Congress and the FMC to sit down and look at the Shipping Act, and which they say hasn't been updated for 30 years. What's your view on that?
That's certainly their prerogative. I mean, I think what we've experienced over the last year has been severe enough where we need to look at all options. We need to look at all solutions. That's the reason why over the last 5 years here in Long Beach and in partnership with the Port of Los Angeles, our focus has been squarely on operational excellence. You know, what can we do to make operations at the port more efficient? How can we introduce predictability, reliability, and velocity? And the reason for that, Nick, is because we're investing aggressively. I mean, we're investing over $4 billion into our infrastructure. So we have a vested interest to make sure that we maximize that infrastructure. And the way we do that is by pairing that up with innovation and investments, a focus on operational excellence. So we're certainly committed to the bigger picture of enhancing efficiencies and injecting overall efficiency, predictability, reliability, and velocity into the supply chain.
That's it seems to me that what you're really talking about is looking forward is digitalization, isn't it? It's about collaborating digitally with people, other stakeholders in the supply chain, and I'm guessing some of that investment, the $4 billion that you're talking about, is in digital requirements, innovations. I'm looking for another word, but yeah.
Well, we're certainly working towards that, Nick. Right now, most of our investments is on the capital side. As I mentioned a moment ago, our CapEx program is the most aggressive of any seaport in North America, over $4 billion. But we're also focused, as you said, on the digital transformation. We see the advantages of technology. We see how the industry itself, different segments of the supply chain on their own are developing, coming up with solutions that optimize our operations. That's the future. There's no question about that. And to the extent that we can leverage emerging technologies to support port operations, we're all in. We're very supportive. But I will say this, though. One of the lessons learned that we have observed about technology is that technology by itself is not a solution. It becomes a solution when that technology is integrated into port operations. And that's what we want to make sure happens. It would make no sense, for example, Nick, for every single segment in the supply chain to develop their own system, to develop their own platform, if it's not going to be interoperable. So as a port authority, we want to make sure that all these technology developments and all these platforms that are being developed talk with each other to ensure that there's a seamless connection across the supply chain.
So that's an interesting point. I mean, I think you're absolutely correct to point to the fact that the system needs to be able to talk to each other, but you also need to develop together. Yes. There needs to be some kind of collaboration, and it seems to me that the shipping lines have established the DCSA, the digital. I've forgotten what it stands for now, but off the top of my head, it's normal for me. I'm getting old.
I talk to them, by the way.
You do talk to them.
Yes.
But it's shipping lines rather than ports, isn't it, that are involved or are members of the DCSA? And I'm just wondering why there isn't an overarching industry body that is trying to standardize the technology, the new technology that's coming on board. And do you think that's actually something that we should be looking at as an industry?
The short answer is yes, and I think DCSA is trying to achieve that. I've talked to them. They've got a very compelling mission, and a lot of what they're thinking about as it relates to the digital transformation aligns with our thoughts as well. In the end, Nick, I agree with you. I think there has to be some overarching system-wide approach to the development of these technologies. The challenge we always run into, of course, is that each of these companies are separate, they're independent, and they're competitors.
Yeah.
There are competitive advantages to developing some of these technological platforms to improve their operations. So we need to make sure that we continue to support, we continue to encourage, and we continue to facilitate that innovation without necessarily getting in the way of each individual company's performance and business plans. But I think where we can play a role and where organizations like DCSA can play a role, Nick, is in the standards. It goes back to what I said a moment ago. It's great that different segments in the supply chain are developing technologies, solutions, but there has to be interoperability. There has to be a way for these platforms to talk to each other. And that's where I think we can play a role, is in facilitating the standards that make those connections possible.
So the digital economy, if you like, is one that is interesting. I mean, there are lots of different innovations, different developments going on, and actually, I'm kind of thinking in the back of my mind here that you've got 35 ships sitting out in the bay there, waiting to find a berth at either LA or Long Beach. There was a system being trialed with Maersk, I believe, and Rotterdam Port, where the ship would be slowed to arrive at the time that it would be berthed immediately, so it didn't have to wait. And I'm just wondering, would that system have helped during this pandemic, or was the flow of cargo so vast that even that kind of digital wonder kit wouldn't have helped?
Mm-hmm. What we're experiencing today is essentially the cargo surge is overwhelming our capacity. I mean, that in short, that's what's happening. I think in an instance like this, that technological solution may have helped, but may not have been a solution. The fact that we have 35, 36 vessels at berth, no technological solution, I believe, could have addressed that proactively. However, going forward, looking to the future, I do believe that there's a place for technology to help better align the arrivals of these ships with the berthing windows and berthing capacities of the terminals. And that's an area, Nick, where I believe technology can play a critical role. That's something that we're looking at, working in partnership with our shipping lines and our marine terminal operators, because to the extent that we can optimize our assets, the shipping lines can optimize theirs. It's in their interest to reduce the stays, the ports of call at each of these terminals. So there's common ground on what we need to do. And so, yes, I believe technology can certainly aid us and enable us in achieving that.
So 2020 is gone. 2021 is here now. What do you think we'll be discussing next January about 2021? What's going to be the big discussion points?
I think 2021 is going to be the year of recovery. I think 2021 is going to give us all an opportunity to look back, reflect on what happened and how we as an industry responded to the pandemic. I believe there's going to be a lot of lessons learned that we're going to implement for the foreseeable future. But I think it's going to be a year of recovery. I think we're going to see some stabilization. I think the market will catch up to reality. This cargo surge that we've seen since July, Nick, at some point is going to start to slow down and catch up with market realities. I've been just astonished and impressed with the recovery in global trade. But then when you look at the global economy and you look at some of these economic barometers, there's still some work to do, right? We're not out of the woods. So I think at some point there's going to be an alignment. But I would say recovery is going to be a key word that we're going to be talking about next January, and lessons learned.
So this year has seen a meteoric rise in online sales, and consumer goods are really being delivered. Actually, that's kind of missing out a step in the supply chain. Has that affected the way you're thinking about the ports and about the way that the port structure is realigned?
Online commerce, or online shopping, e-commerce, is one of the things that has been accelerated because of the pandemic, right? We have seen over the years the rise of e-commerce. Every year, we've noticed that more and more consumers here in America are buying goods online. In fact, just last year, and actually it was 2019, there was a report that came out that said that online shopping was projected to double in the next 5 years. Well, I think it's going to happen much, much sooner because this pandemic has induced that. How that affects us, Nick, is e-commerce fulfillment requires retailers to have more inventory and to have that inventory closer to the end consumer. And I think that will continue to drive imports through ports like ours. I mean, we are the major gateway here in America. We have the scale, we have the capacity. So as online shopping continues to grow, I believe we will continue to see more of that product arrive through our ports. Now, over time, a lot of these retailers are going to become more sophisticated in their fulfillment practices. They're going to optimize their inventory management systems. Over time, you may see some of that cargo spread out, because the other big piece of e-commerce fulfillment is that the inventory has to be close to the end consumer. That's the way that you expedite delivery. So I do see a near-term advantage for us in terms of overall cargo flows because of online commerce. Over time, it remains to be seen if some of that cargo is going to be spread across the country. But we're certainly tracking that.
Do you see a time when Long Beach's reach extends beyond the boundaries of the port as a consequence of that kind of online selling, the fulfillment element of it?
You mean in terms of our
warehousing, storage depots, logistics? Is that something you'd like to get into?
I think that so right now we have about 2 billion square feet of footprint, distribution centers, warehouses in close proximity to the ports. Over time, as the market grows, there will be a demand for that. I don't see warehouses and distribution centers, for example, popping up within the port, only because land, real estate in the port is very limited and comes at a high premium, right? So it's very expensive.
Yes.
I would also say that it's not to our advantage or our marine terminals to have the port serve as a warehouse. However, I do foresee, Nick, in the years ahead, more and more of these warehouses and distribution centers that will continue to be developed in the perimeter of the port. I think that's a given, just in light of all. But
you were saying quite interestingly that the inventory needs to be closer to the end user, to the consumer. So what I'm considering, or what I'm thinking in my head here, smaller as it is that maybe you as a port might have free trade zones that you would operate outside of the port area. That it would the port would extend its reach. Is that a future development, or is that pie in the sky?
Yeah, no, thank you for clarifying, Nick. I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, we already employ foreign trade zones as tools to attract more cargo. And right. I absolutely believe that will continue to be a tool in the years ahead.
And as a final question, because I think we're running out of time here, it's very interesting talking to you. But I'm going to change the subject. I'm sorry, but the election has thrown up a new president who's going to take office on the 20th. Joe Biden is a very different character to Donald Trump, and he's already talked about rejoining the Paris Agreement, etc. Do you see things changing under Joe Biden for the logistics industry? What kind of developments would you expect from a democratic government?
Well, first of all, we work with any administration.
Sure.
I do foresee changes in policy and in areas of focus under the Biden administration. And first of all, President-elect Biden was actually in Long Beach just a few months back, and he was visiting the site of our new bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And so he was there in person, and he saw the construction, he saw the port. So I believe that he has an interest in global trade. He has an interest in making sure that America's ports are successful. I think a Biden administration would certainly take a different approach as it relates to tariffs, trade policies with some of our top trade partners, including China. I also see, given his prior experience under the Obama administration, a focus on exports, which I think would lend a hand to our exporters here in America. So I do see changes in a positive way for trade and for our shippers, especially as it relates to trade policy. I would also add that the focus on investing in infrastructure is going to be key too. As I mentioned, we have the most aggressive CapEx program of any seaport in North America. A lot of that funding has been secured through federal grants and programs of that type. Mr. Biden has indicated that he's very interested in investing in America's infrastructure, and I think that could also support the supply chain.
Are there new projects in the pipeline like the bridge? The bridge was I think 10 years in the making, something
That's
like
right.
this, and it has just opened, as if I'm not mistaken. My understanding is that about 1/5 of America's trade will go over that bridge. So it's an incredibly important piece of infrastructure. Is there something else on the cards? Is there more rail, for example, more
Yes.
roadways?
As a matter of fact, Nick, our latest capital project is the Pure Beyond Dock Rail Support Facility. It has a preliminary budget of $870 million. And basically what it does is that it expands our rail capacity within the port. It supports our terminals and also enables them to add additional rail capacity within their terminals. And it will significantly increase our ability to move more containers out of the port via rail. It will just add tremendous efficiencies to our rail system. And right now, as we're designing the project, we're also developing an operating plan to ensure that this asset that we're developing is going to be optimized and maximized. So we're very excited about the project. That's a great example of something the federal government can support. Why? Because containers that are moved through the ports of LA and Long Beach support the national economy to the tune of over 2 million jobs and nearly $400 billion in terms of the value of goods. So I believe that all of our projects in Long Beach are projects of national significance, and we certainly hope that the incoming administration will recognize that and be a partner with us in investing in that capital.
And when do you expect the rail project to come online then? When will it be finished?
It's got a very long runway, different phases. It stretches out approximately 12 years, but it's going to be developed in phases, and each phase is going to start adding rail capacity immediately. So we're very excited about the project. Okay.
Dr. Noel Hacegaba, thank you very much for coming to One-to-One, to speaking with us today. We very much appreciate it. Bye-bye.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.